call back our regular meeting at 7:36, and I'll turn it back over to our city solicitor.
Thank you very much. For purposes of the record, I made reference to a letter we received from the ACLU earlier today. We also received a letter from the State of Delaware Attorney General's office that I was remiss in not mentioning earlier, and I will synopsize the letter and just read the conclusion. I won't read the entire letter into the record, although we can make it a part of the record if you'd like. It starts out, it's a letter to me, starting out with Mr. Griffith. It has come to our attention that the City of Seaford's Council has an upcoming meeting that includes a reading of the following pending legislative action, and then it quotes the ordinance. And the letter concludes with the following: we would appreciate hearing from your client or you about the legal authority for the City of Seaford to legislate in this sphere. We also respectfully ask the council to table this ordinance until such time as we are able to assess whether this ordinance is consistent with federal and state law. So, council members, in view of this letter and the ACLU's letter and other considerations, you have before you a couple options. You can, in accordance with the request from the Attorney General's office, move to table a vote on this. And if either that vote is defeated or you choose not to vote to table the vote, you can vote substantively on whether or not to approve and enact the ordinance. You can entertain a motion for either one, to either table it or to vote substantively on the ordinance.
Okay, if there's no questions for the city solicitor, I'll accept the motion.
All right, Mr. Mayor, this is Councilman King. Based on the recommendations from the Attorney General's office from the state of Delaware and pending litigation, I make a motion that we table this conversation until there's more information provided to us.
Okay, we have a motion to table. Is there a second?
I'll table it. I will second it.
We have a second. Okay, are there any questions on the motion? All right, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Out of respect for the Department of Justice of the state of Delaware, I vote aye.
Councilman Holland?
I will vote aye also.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Okay, so we will table this and bring this back at such time that we have additional information.
And I'll keep council and the mayor informed of my discussions with the state.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll take a 5-minute recess to allow this crowd to slip out. I'm sure they don't want to listen to the vote on truck bids. So, thank you very much. See Dan.
I can answer that question.
Ready? All right, we're back to a regular meeting at 7:43, and we'll go to new business number 1. And we're gonna, are we calling up?
Yes.
We are? Yes, sir.
Yeah,
You're
Jamie
up.
Nutter, our attorney for this issue, is here this evening. So he can give us some background related to the remediating opioids across Delaware through state municipal abatement partnership, or the Roads Map Agreement.
That's the acronym. And good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council.
Good evening.
Jamie Nutter with the law firm of Parkowski, Girk, and Swayze. Special counsel to the city of Seaford for litigation related to the opioid crisis and with respect to all claims, against distributors, manufacturers, pharmacies, anyone who may be responsible for the opioid crisis. It's our own claim that was filed on behalf of the city of Seaford in conjunction. There were 4 litigating subdivisions: Kent County, Sussex County, the city of Dover, and the city of Seaford. And the city of Newcastle, the county of Newcastle also had retained counsel. So they had a claim, but they didn't actually file. All of the non-state level claims, meaning not brought by the Attorney General, were consolidated and under what's called the MDL in federal court. And all they're stayed essentially while certain litigation goes forward. They call them bellwether claims of some of the early first filers. That is moving forward, and the state of Delaware, through our Attorney General, has joined a settlement against 4 parties. These would be the 3 biggest distributors: Cardinal Health, McKesson, and AmerisourceBergen, and as well one of the manufacturers, Johnson & Johnson. And the total of that settlement for all states and subdivisions that has been set aside is about $26 billion. There is, in that settlement, both a default provision for allocating that settlement money to the states, and it's essentially a percentage of the total, and Delaware's percentage is less than 0.5% based on population. And there's harm-based criteria, so Delaware is considered a high harm state, so it's higher than it would otherwise have been based solely on population. But some of the harm-based criteria are the extent of prescriptions, the extent of overdose deaths, the extent of overdoses, things of that nature. All told, over 18 years between the 2, Delaware, depending on the allocation, is probably going to receive somewhere between $95 and $112 million. Under the distribution, the city of Seaford, there's a default mechanism, which would be essentially a 70-15-15. The 70%, and this is to not repeat some of the either real or perceived failures in the tobacco settlement, was that 70% has to go to direct abatement, to treatment, to recovery, to behavioral health services, to anything that helps capture and abate the crisis. Then 15% would go to a state share, and 15% to a local government share. The settlement agreements contemplate that the states, individual states, could alter that default by legislation or a state subdivision agreement, which is this roads map, which is this Attorney General has developed, and they've been collaborative with the subdivisions. There would be 10 that would be eligible to participate in the roads map. Again, it's based on principally on population, so it's your larger state-level municipalities in the 3 counties. So it's Wilmington, Newark, Middletown, Dover, Seaford, Milford. And the more, first with respect to the settlement, the more participating subdivisions that sign on, the higher the percentage allocation that comes to the state. So within that that 95 to 112, or those amounts that I told you, if we get 100% participation from all the state, the necessary subdivisions, we get the maximum amount of money for the state. And that's because the settling parties, the defendants, want finality. They want to know that they're getting sort of a full release from, and they're not going to be facing additional claims. But it really is the crush of all of the litigation nationwide, more than 3,000 subdivisions and all of the states that helped bring about the settlement. And as well, not only just in monetary amount, but in change with respect to prescribing, reimbursement, and other sort of injunctive relief. So that is important in addition to the funding. This roads map agreement, these are the first 4 settlements. There is also proposed agreements or what they call reorganization plans in bankruptcy with respect to the Purdue parties. And the Purdue Pharma is the manufacturer of OxyContin, and they're believed by many to have been the primary cause of the opioid crisis with the marketing and of OxyContin. And there's also another entity in bankruptcy, Mallinckrodt. And if we join into the roads map agreement, those settlements would follow the same process in terms of allocation. Under the default, just so you have a sense, our co-counsel believes, based on the allocations and formulas, that Seaford would probably receive about $259,000 spread out over 18 to 20 years. And that would be from the distributors and another 60 from the Johnson & Johnson settlement. So somewhere less than $330,000, and that would be under the default. I can tell you that the roads map agreement under the settlement that's been agreed to with the distributors, the state subdivision authorization provisions in that settlement agreement are population driven, meaning if enough of the other subdivisions sign on, it becomes the operative agreement whether or not Seaford signs on. If Newcastle County and some of the larger subdivisions that represent more than 50% of the population of the state sign on, then it does become the operative agreement. But it's our recommendation, I've discussed it with Mr. Griffith, that this city should join, and when the appropriate time comes, that the city should join the settlements as well by becoming a participating subdivision in the settlement agreements. There's two. The framework for how the money will get allocated comes from 2 sources, and one is Senate Bill 66, which was passed by the General Assembly this past legislative session and is going to be signed into law on Thursday. And that sets up a prescription opioid settlement fund and a commission for how that money in that fund will be allocated. And then there's the roads map agreement. And under the roads map agreement, all money that comes to the state, not just the Seaford percentage of its share, or the Newcastle County percentage, or the state's 70% abatement fund, or the state's 15% of its share, but all money would roll up into this settlement distribution fund, and it would be distributed based on a commission approach, which would be 15 members, all representatives of the local government would also have a subcommittee, and Seaford would have its own seat on the subcommittee, as well as a seat through the legal local governments on the distribution commission itself. Each of the counties would have a seat on the distribution commission, and then representatives of one from the House, one from the majority, one from the minority party, one from the Senate, one from the majority, one from the minority party, the director of the Health and Social Services, secretary, public members from the Addiction Committee and the Substance Abuse Recovery health systems, as well as the Attorney General, their designee, and the governor. And so all the money would roll up into that, and not just the settlement money as well. There is other settlements money that's already ready to go in there. a consulting firm settled for $2 million for its part, and that money, we did not have a direct claim against this consulting firm, so that money's waiting to get distributed in the same process, as well as the legislature several sessions ago adopted a prescription opioid impact fee on this. That was a small fee charged on the sale of opioid products in the state, and that money will roll up into this fund. And then all of that money would be allocated on an annual basis. And the expectation is that the money will start to be received from the distributor and Johnson & Johnson settlement early next year, first quarter, sometime probably around April, and start to hit the street. The Attorney General has, there was a lot of suspicion, I should say, from those that have been in municipal government longer than I about how the process would be to make sure that the state just didn't sort of vacuum up all the money and not make its way down into the local governments. And I believe most of the local governments have been satisfied with this process. Sussex County's already signed the agreement, this roads map agreement. Newcastle County, my understanding, is going to sign as well once the legislation is signed into law. And Kent County's discussed it and is meeting again tonight. Do you want to go through the operative provisions of the agreement itself, or do you want me to stop and answer any questions at this point of council
Go
members?
through all the details. All right. Are there any questions in regards to this agreement, Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Nutter, did I hear you correctly that the estimated portion of our settlement would be $295,000?
That would be over 20 years, and I think it would be about 260 and 60. So that's just the ballpark guess from the settlements, from these particular settlement
Over
parties.
20 years dispersed how?
There are going to be annual payments, and some will be front-loaded.
The gross amount is $300,000, or is it $300,000 per year?
That's the gross amount, so about
Okay, so it's
$15,000,
$15,000 a year.
Yes, and then you would have to allocate that towards abatement and record keep and find
Right.
worthy projects in your community. And so that was, some of the sense was from participating in with other cities on the calls was, could we do more if it was rolled up and aggregated and more projects? Do you get an economy of scale and a bigger impact?
Follow up. So,
Yes, sir.
so your estimation is that if more subdivisions join this agreement, that those funds wouldn't be diluted, they would be increased?
But assuming the money that I suggested would come to Seaford, the estimate is assuming the maximum participation at the state level. And then that is the maximum participation in being a settling party in signing the settlement agreement and agreeing that this resolves all the claims that the city of Seaford may have against these four parties. My belief is that the roads map will be the operative agreement, even if Seaford signs, even if Seaford settles but doesn't agree to the roads map, the state subdivision agreement. It's going to most likely be the operative agreement because the population threshold will be met, given that Sussex County's already signed and Newcastle County's will likely join as well. There is no deadline on when you sign. The agreement, their hope is to have it's spelled out that it takes effect either on 10/31 of this year or when the last party joins, the last eligible party joins. So it'll be effective as to Seaford when you decide to join. But if you don't sign it, what you're doing is foregoing the opportunity to participate and have a say in how the money's going to be allocated.
You don't get a seat on the board.
That's right.
Correct.
Yeah.
One other, if I could. Can you help me understand, I mean, you were here about 24 months ago, maybe more, and asked that we join
That's right.
with this. What was the mechanism of how that pursuit got morphed into a state pool? I mean, I'm trying to understand that.
As soon as we filed in Superior Court, the defendants filed what's called removal asserting that these claims were controlled by federal jurisdiction and better served under one administrative court called a multi-district litigation panel. And so it's essentially every one of these cases that has been filed by local governments has been aggregated under the Ohio District Court in Ohio under a judge named Judge Polster, and he's been administering them. As soon as they all come in, they all get stayed. We filed a removal petition. It's held because by bringing them all together, you sort of it's a more efficient way to administer them, at least in the court's perspective, than having 3,000 cases all pending in various stages across across the country with potentially disparate results. So essentially, as soon as the case got filed, it got removed, and it's been stayed ever since, while parties have worked on settlements.
And I assume by your presence here, you think this is the best deal for the city rather than to go it alone?
Well, there's two. Yeah, there's two. There would be two separate. Yeah. So the next one is going to be, do you sign the settlement agreement? And that is going to be a separate decision as well. The roads map really governs how any money that does come in would be allocated and what role Seaford would have in that. But it is mine and Mr. Griffith's opinion that you should join both, because the prospect of going alone after all of the money that the parties intend to pay out or hope to pay out has been essentially allocated to that process, then you're litigating and on your own, having to prove certain elements of damage, which may be more difficult or concrete to pin down, because a lot of the services that are administered at the state level in terms of corrections, in terms of health and social services, all sort of fund out through the state. And then it could be, by the time you get to settlement, very, very far in the future, or excuse me, to litigation very far in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Nutter? Councilman King?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Nutter, you did a really good job explaining it. I just have a couple of questions. When you look at the total dollar amount that's being distributed, if I understood you correctly, it's based on population. So, for example, when you look at Seaford, Seaford's a very unique city. We actually provide a lot of service for people that don't live in our city, right? So we got some clinics and stuff where people come in and get daily treatment and then leave the city. And then, of course, we've got a large homeless population where some people are fighting addiction. So I guess my question is that a true measure when you look at as far as the total percent and representation? How is that measured? So when someone says based on population, based on percents, I assume that's how the money's distributed. Larger areas may get more, smaller areas get less. But when you look at that kind of makes sense. The question that I'm asking, like, how is that measured?
Yeah. I think the Attorney General's letter, talks about the amount that's coming in across the board is really insufficient to really remediate the harm that's been caused. And there's a lot of different calculations or ways that you can sort of look at and measure harm. Is it just things that are sort of concrete overdoses and things like that, or is it depressed tax base, vacant properties and some of those other quality of life and public nuisance type related harms, so to speak. I believe a lot of what you're referencing were things that the Attorney General tried to really push in getting Delaware designated as a high harm state, so to speak. But in terms of how to allocate among every subdivision in the state that is potentially eligible, and you've got tribal communities and things as well, candidly, I'm not an expert in how the allocation formula is developed within each of the subdivisions, relative to the others. But I don't think there's an amount that is probably sufficient, really.
Yeah, and I understand. I get that. I mean, 13,000 a year. I mean, an ambulance. I mean, just providing daily service is way more than that. I mean, this settlement wouldn't cover the cost of one. Right. But I guess my question is there a possible way, based on statistics and what we're dealing with, could we counter and say, hey, we hear you, that's great, but we want more? Because to your point, I mean, that's just a drop in the bucket when you look at all the harm that opioids is, not just here, our entire country. So is there a way that we could say, hey, we hear you, is there a way we can get more? Or is this kind of like it's just divided out and it is what it is?
Well, so under the roads map agreement, nobody's getting anything. Everybody's agreeing to pool their share. So that's under the roads map agreement, all the money that comes to the state in the abatement fund pot would roll up into the distribution fund. Same with all of the state money and same with all of the subdivision money. So all of the eligible subdivisions, to the extent we get 100% participation, would be making that same sort of redirection of their direct allocation.
But would they get the same allocation? Would everyone get the same allocation, or is there just getting more?
There would be no direct allocation
I see
to any of them.
Okay.
So Wilmington wouldn't be getting any money.
Okay.
Seaford wouldn't be getting any money, and those sort of, well, we should get more than Milford, or we should get more than Middletown. That sort of playing, or that sort of argument's not the right word. You understand?
Sure.
But sort of advocating for your community.
Right. Exactly.
Won't take place because it's all going to roll up.
Okay.
And be distributed through a committee process. I can tell you that under the legislation, one of the things that's in there is that the money that goes to that fund can't be used to offset or supplant other state funding or other municipal funding. So that's sort of the lockbox, if you will, that it can't be rated if there's a couple bad years in the state. But yeah, each community that's eligible, if they're a signatory, is essentially agreeing that all the money could potentially have a greater impact if it were pooled.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Nutter? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion. Excuse me. To approve the remediating opioids across Delaware through state municipal abatement partnership, also known as Roads Map Agreement, state subdivision agreement pursuant to the opioid settlement agreements for the state of Delaware, and permit the mayor to execute the documentation on Seaford's behalf as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman King, I'll second that motion.
Okay, are there any questions on the motion? I will do a roll call vote. Councilman McCoy.
Aye.
Councilman King.
Aye.
Councilman Holland. Aye. Councilman Henderson.
Aye.
Councilman Santos.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Mr. Nutter, thank you,
Thank
as
you.
always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the easement.
Yes, and I apologize. I had coordinated with the gentleman to be here from the Sussex Conservation District, Mr. Jim Elliott. Skeeter. Council will recall, but I certainly can present this, and if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide. Council will recall, and maybe just to get you oriented on this document, at the bottom of the page there, the road that you see is at the northern end of our industrial park, and it outfalls into a prong of Herring Run Branch. And the tan shaded area that you see there is really two things. One, it's a temporary construction easement, and then the crosshatched area within the tan shaded area is a permanent easement. To the top of the page there is actually the edge of the industrial park that borders Heritage Village. And council will recall, Mr. Elliott came and he worked on a project to create an outfall from a blind ditch that's located there. And when we discussed the project, there were some things that we requested for us to provide the easement. One of them obviously was that it would create no impacts downstream. Our city engineers did do that analysis, and based on their review, they are recommending this would not cause any problems downstream. Secondly, we, the city and city council supported it, wanted to know who would maintain this storm drainage system, because it technically is not a city, it's installed in city land, but it does not serve city residents, city facilities. So they took that information back from city council, and what they've presented in your attached document is a deed of easement. And if you take a look at that, we grant this easement is the request, and then the Heritage Village Association and the Sussex Conservation District would be the people that would maintain this system after installation for the long term. We have reviewed the plans, the Director of Electric, the Public Works Director, and reviewed the easement. We have talked about this project for many years, and we know there is a problem with our neighbors there. Certainly staff would recommend to support this project. I guess the only other thing I'll add, this does cross lands that are owned by Orient Chemical, so that company would also have to give approval of this. We just have authority over the easement because it's on our subdivision drawings, and they would co-locate in our easement that we identified there. But I certainly will try to answer any questions that council might have.
Any questions in regards to the easement between the city of Seaford and Heritage Village? If not, I'll accept the motion. Do you have a question, Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, I'm just curious to know the extent of talks you've had with Orient Chemical and whether they're amenable to this agreement?
I have had a couple conversations with the plant manager because we wanted to talk directly. They have no problem signing the easement. They understand the problem. They want to help Heritage Village residents just as the city does. But their big thing was they wanted to know someone was responsible for the maintenance. They did not want to take on that maintenance. So by solving this problem and making those two entities, I have not talked to them directly, but it certainly solves our issue. And until they're made happy, the project cannot proceed because they also have to give approval to proceed with this project.
All right, any other questions? If not, I'll accept the motion.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Councilman King, I will make a motion to approve the deed of easement between the City of Seaford, the grantor, and Heritage Village Association and the Sussex Conservation District grantees to install stormwater piping on Sussex County tax map and parcel number 531-10.00-207.01 and 209.00 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman McCoy, I'll second.
All right, thank you. Any questions on the motion? We'll do a roll call vote. Councilman King.
Aye.
Councilman McCoy.
Aye.
Councilman Holland.
Aye.
Councilman Henderson.
Aye.
Councilman Santos.
Aye.
It's unanimous. All right, next we have the Pooled Legal Resource Fund for the American Rescue.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. As staff has been keeping council aware, we have received American Rescue Plan Act funds. We've received our first tranche, $2.2 million. Council at their, I believe it was their last meeting, identified 5 projects that we would spend that money on. And with the guidance that has come out, staff feels that those are eligible projects, so on and so forth. This pooled legal resource fund was recommended by the state of Delaware. And there is some information in your package about how it works and what the monetary commitments are. But the high-level explanation of this is all of the people who receive these ARPA funds, it is your option, if you receive them, to donate a small percentage of the second tranche of the ARPA funds to a legal fund, and then the state would hire, with that money, Barnes Thornburg, and then they would advise us on any questions that we might have for project expenditures, anything that would come up. And if rules changed or we needed guidance, they would be the go-to for all of us. Did do some calculations based on the cost of this, and it's approximately $17,000 to participate. So it's a small amount if you consider the $4.2 million that we're receiving. When I talked with the director of finance about this, we both agreed we felt like we should participate because if we get audited, we certainly want to have their help in this, and we felt like if we did not participate, it might cost us quite a bit more if we have to talk to our attorneys or if we have to talk to our auditors if we have a question. Certainly, I'll try to answer any questions. I guess the only other thing that I'll add is we do not have the engagement letter with the firm of Barnes Thornburg yet. I did reach out to them 2 weeks ago. They're preparing that. The information that we give you, we have included in your package gives some who we would be working with, what their qualifications are. What we ask here is that allow the city manager to execute the engagement letter once it comes forward. As long as there are no major changes from what's outlined here, we would not bring that back. If it's different than this, then certainly staff will bring that back and update council on any changes in that engagement letter.
All right, are there any questions on the ARPA Legal Service Fund Program? Councilman McCoy.
City Manager, just further context, why Barnes and Thornburg? Do we have experience with them? Have they done services such as before that we know of? Like, why them specifically?
Yeah, I have not had any personal contact with them. I actually just did a cold call to Mr. Thornburg. This comes recommended by our contact at the state of Delaware. They have worked with them, and they have some familiarity with them, so really it was their recommendation. You know, I did participate in a couple conference calls, Zoom meetings, I guess they were, and no one of our peers, and there were many on that call, some had some familiarity with this firm. No one had any objections to their use.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to approve the city manager to execute an engagement letter with the firm Barnes and Thornburg LLP to participate in the ARPA Legal Services Fund Program pertaining to the City of Seaford's participation in the Pooled Legal Resource Fund to provide shared legal services to ensure American Rescue Plan Act compliance as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Councilman Holland seconds. Are there any question on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Okay, next we have the first reading of proposed changes to Chapter 15.
Okay, so council, in your packages, you have some recommended changes to the zoning ordinance, and it's actually Chapter 15, Division 3, and it's involving the C3 Riverfront Enterprise Zone section, Section 1548C, uses by right, A, 6, and C, prohibited uses A, 7, 8, and 9 of the municipal code. And if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide, Mr. Andrews. So just to refresh everyone's memory, the C3, this is kind of a poor picture, I apologize, but the C3 area that we're talking about is the downtown area, so outlined in red there, basically where you are there. And what we've added here is the modifications are in red, so number 6 in Section 1548C, uses by right, is, it states medical, we're adding excluding substance abuse clinics, professional and business offices. So we would exclude substance abuse clinics if this were adopted. And then if you go down to items 7, 8, and 9, it would be to include, and these are prohibited uses, medical or recreational marijuana dispensaries and use facilities, medical offices or clinics for the treatment of substance abuse or dispensing of medications for the treatment of substance abuse. And the genesis of this, or the reason why we're presenting this code change for a first reading, and it will come back for a second at the next council meeting, we have seen that the existing facility that we have in our downtown area is somewhat incongruous to the surrounding uses. We're getting quite a few complaints about panhandling, people hanging out. There's not enough room in the area for people that are waiting, so they're hanging out into the street. And what this would do, if council adopts this, as council is well aware, after the second reading, we would advertise it for 30 days, and it would prohibit any other facilities from moving in. The existing facility could remain. It would be what's called grandfather for the regular term. Non-conforming is the actual term. And it could continue to exist as it is, so on and so forth. But if it decided to leave, then it could not come back into this area. Just to talk a little bit about medical or recreational marijuana dispensaries and use facilities, this is somewhat preemptive in this area. We anticipate, obviously now, medical marijuana is legal, as I understand it. We do not have a dispensary. We have received some inquiries about locations within the city, and recreational is being discussed. If you read the newspaper, you see it, so that's somewhat preemptive. Now, the only other thing I'll add is that this only prohibits these from the C3 area or this downtown core area. So they obviously could go and with the substance abuse clinics, they are in other locations. That would not change, so they can still go in other commercial areas of the city. This is not a complete prohibition within the city. This is just with our zoning ordinance saying what areas are appropriate, what areas are less appropriate for that. So certainly I will try to answer any questions council might have.
Any questions on the code change? Councilman King?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Charles, can you allude or talk a little bit more around why just this area of our city, and why is this kind of like flagged and saying, hey, it's okay to have these type of facilities anywhere else in our city other than our downtown district? Can you talk a little bit how that come to fruition?
Okay, and if you don't mind, I'll break it down into two things.
Sure.
Okay, one, the medical, I want to use the right terms, substance abuse clinics. As stated before, they're just incongruous. The one that is there just does not fit into the downtown. As council's well aware, there really is a rebirth downtown, right? There's a lot of investment being made up and down the commercial corridor along the riverfront, and we talk regularly with those business owners, with those investors, and our police department does yeoman's work to try to work with the homeless people here to do those type things. But there are just it's just incongruous in this location. So we felt like we did not want to proliferate more of that. If you move on to medical recreational marijuana dispensaries, again, we don't have one. But we also, if you think about the things we prohibit in the area, just to talk about some things, pawn shops, warehouses, retail stores, tattoo parlors, adult entertainment. The feeling there is this now is a thing. This now can happen to us. So we felt like it was more like the other things and it should be included, if that answers your question.
It does, but I guess the perception, the pawn shops, the tattoo parlors, the medical marijuana, I mean, is it like taboo? Like, is it just, we don't want that? I guess the thing that when you look at just this district, right, you're saying, hey, don't do that once again in this district, but yet you do it anywhere else in the city.
Yeah,
I guess I'm kind of getting hung up a little bit.
Okay.
Saying, hey, you can have it anywhere you want other than here.
No, maybe I'll answer it in two ways. Okay. In consulting with our attorney on this, we cannot completely prohibit legal businesses. Okay, and medical marijuana is a legal business, so we could have our zone. If we said it's not allowed anywhere, that would be held invalid likely by a court. So what I would suggest we also consider, if council supports a prohibition in this area, I think what we also ought to do is potentially, if they are permitted in, let's say, C1 or C2 zones, we could look at putting some stipulations on them, okay? How large their parking lot is, how large their waiting room is. We can do certain things like that through zoning. We control how large, how many bedrooms, how large the bedroom is, things like that. So I would suggest we might consider looking at other zoning controls, but they're a fact. They're a legal business. Does that answer?
It does. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from council? All right, this is a first reading, so this will come back through at our next meeting. All right.
Mr. Mayor, I just
Yes.
thought of another question. Well, a question for this. Are there any medical dispensaries, medical marijuana dispensaries right now in the state or the state?
Yes.
There are?
Yes.
In the state, I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay. And where are they at, and how does it look like for them? Like, are they also downtown, or do you know? Do you know?
I've only ridden by one in Maryland. I don't know where the ones are in Sussex County, so I don't know.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of get an idea how those are performing and how they are affecting the neighboring facilities and yeah.
And it might be a good, Councilman, you bring up a good point. It might be a good idea for someone in our planning and zoning department or our building department, maybe to go to the existing locations, talk to those proprietors, look at it themselves and see what works there, what doesn't, and maybe we could learn from some of that. That's not a bad suggestion.
And I'd also like to see if if people walking by can smell it from outside, or how, because that could be a nuisance for people walking downtown. But at the same time, if there's certain if it's a store, kind of like a liquor store, where you can't go in if you're under a certain age, and there's no smell. I just want to get some more clarification how it's being done now and how it would affect our citizens.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, this will come back through at our next meeting. Next, we have bids on the 2 pickup trucks. Is that Mr. Bennett?
Yes, it is.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and City Manager.
Good evening.
The City of Seaford went out for bids on 2 pickup trucks, one for the electric department, one for Parks and Rec. We received 2 bids back. Lakeshore Motors bid a total cost without trade for the 2 pickups at $77,000. And Hertrick Fleet Services bid a total cost without trade of $65,344. So Hertrick Fleet Services was low bid. In the electric department, they allowed $7,500 for trade-in, so the total cost would be $25,172. In my budget, I did have $35,000, but that also, there's money in there to put a light bar on the truck, move the air board over, and put a toolbox in the back that the current one has. And that's probably gonna be about $4,000, so I would still be under budget. Parks and Rec is trading in 2006 Ford. They got $3,500, so their bid came in for $29,172. They had $28,000 in their budget, so they would have a budget overrun of $1,172. So with that, I would recommend that the bid be awarded to Hertrick Fleet Services in the amount of $54,344, accepting the trade allowances for the 2011 Dodge and the 2006 Ford F-150.
Okay, are there any questions on the pickup trucks? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to award the bid for the 2 2022 half-ton 4x4 pickup trucks to Hertrick Fleet Services, Inc. in the amount of $54,344 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that motion.
Councilman Holland seconds. Are there any questions on the motion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman McCoy.
Aye.
Councilman Holland.
Aye.
Councilman Henderson.
Aye.
Councilman Santos.
Aye.
Councilman King.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
All right, last we have the overrun on the carpet.
Okay, so council will recall in this budget year, we planned 2 improvements at the office building located at 400 High Street. One was painting the exterior. We budgeted $8,000. And the other was carpeting the downstairs. Council will recall GMB is our tenant. They recently expanded. We expanded the upstairs for them because of growth in their office. And the painting on the exterior was in need of paint. That did come in less, $2,500 less. We got 2 proposals for the painting, so we saved a little money there. But we did receive 2 quotes for the carpet, and the low quote there was 20,000. Let me get to it. 20,400, I believe, as it's opening up. And that is 20,204. Thank you. That is over budgeted $10,000. I will say the other quote we got was 20% higher, about $5,000 higher than this. I'll point out a couple things. One, prices are a little bit volatile right now due to some inflation in the construction industry. The office is full, and people are working in it. You can see from some of the pictures that are displayed, the carpet is in bad shape. We put it in, I think, in 2001, and it's bubbled up in a lot of places. It's ripped in other places. We certainly have gotten our life out of it. What we would replace it with would be carpet tiles, so we would hope that it would last a little longer this time for our investment. And we've also specified the vendor has to move all of the furniture and replace all the furniture, and we're asking the vendor not to disrupt the business, so to work with us over 2 weekends, so they could come in on a Friday if we schedule with our tenant, and then work Friday and Saturday, and then come back the next week. So the price is a little high because we're asking the vendor to do a lot. I will say we are asking for a budget overrun. We would take the money out of GMB rent reserves if council decided to proceed. Currently, that fund has just over $65,000 in it. So we do have the funds available if council would decide to proceed. If not, we can certainly rebudget this for next year and go back out into the market at that point.
Okay, are there any questions on the overrun for carpet? If not, I'll accept a motion. Councilman Sim.
What's the life of this carpet? How long did this carpet last?
Like I say, we put it in the early 2000s. So and remember, when we initially did this was, I don't know if you remember, but this was actually where City Council met. So in the first 5 or 7 years when we bought the building, we only used that half of the building for, a couple times a week. And then when we moved here in 2004, GMB took the entire building. So part of that has only been fully occupied since 2004. So let's say 15, 18 years worth of service.
Okay, so this carpet lasts about 15 years. If we were to replace this with a carpet that's similar, that's not has high end, would you think we'd still be over budget?
I don't know. I didn't ask that. This is a broadloom carpet like you would buy for your house. What we're specified now is a carpet tile. Carpet tiles typically what you use in commercial buildings. You can replace carpet tile. They're like 18 by 18, and you can take those up should you need to, should someone spill it or something like that. And you get a lot more wear in a commercial building out of a carpet tile. But yeah, I mean, we can.
How many years do you think the carpet tiles would extend? How long would it be extended as opposed to using?
Yeah, carpet's
cheaper?
an interesting thing. It depends on the wear and the maintenance that's done, the vacuuming, the shampooing, things like that. But typical building materials, I always say you think about 20 years as a rule of thumb. Carpet in a situation like this, I would say slightly less. I would expect, again, 15 to 18 years out of carpet tile. Usually the color changes before you get tired of the color you like.
Can I make a comment? Regardless of the type of carpet that you use, your labor is going to be increased because this would be a full move out in order to lay down roll carpet. You'd have to move everything out of that building in order to get the carpet down. The carpet tiles are meant, you just have to move furniture, lay carpet, and put furniture back over it. So your labor will go up whether you save money in materials or not. I think this is the right application for this type of material.
Any other questions on the carpet? Yes.
What's the square footage, Charles, of the building?
Yeah, I did do that
Yeah, the cost
after
per square
our,
foot.
yes, sir,
I'm curious,
after our meeting.
That seems, like we talked about, it seems high
Yeah.
for carpet.
Okay, so I did the calculations and it's only the downstairs, and the building's in 2 halves downstairs. So the total is 4,525 square feet approximately. So when you do the math, that's $4.47 per square foot. And, dovetailing with what Councilman Henderson said, if we save $1 or $2 on the materials, we're only talking $4,000 or $5,000. So that was a good point.
Other questions? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to approve the requested budget overrun for carpet installation at the GMB office building located at 400 High Street as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Santos. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilman Coy, second. Okay, are there any questions of the motion? Do a roll call vote. Councilman Santos.
Aye.
Councilman Henderson.
Aye.
Councilman Holland.
Aye.
Councilman McCoy.
Aye.
Councilman King.
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. All right, down to old business number 2, second reading.
We have an encore performance.
Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, would be the second reading of the proposed change to Chapter 6, Article 2 concerning multifamily residences only, where they would have to, starting in January, purchase the meters for the multifamily residences. So, do you have any questions concerning this?
Are there any questions regarding the multi-dwelling units and the changes to this chapter? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve the proposed changes to Chapter 6, Article 2 of the Municipal Code of the City of Seaford, Electric Rules and Regulations, Definitions E for residents, 1 and 2, Section 9, meter installation, power factor and demand determination, A, meters 1 and 2, placing the cost of electric metering equipment supplied by the City of Seaford on the property owner or developer for multi-family residences. Proposed charges to become effective January 1, 2022. The City Electric Department will honor estimates that already have been issued to existing property owners or developers as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Do we have a second?
Councilman King, I'll second that
Councilman
motion.
second. Any other questions on the motion? All right, if not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman McCoy.
Aye.
Councilman King.
Aye.
Councilman Holland.
Aye.
Councilman Henderson.
Aye.
Councilman Santos.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, reminders of meetings.
All right, I have two things. We have citywide Halloween trick-or-treating will be held October 31st, 2021, from 6 p.m. until 8 p.m. for children 12 years old, under 12 years old, with proper COVID-19 precautions in place. And I have one more that did not make the agenda. This Friday, October 15th, from 5 to 7 at the fenced-in area at Central Elementary by the softball fields will be the Seaford High School homecoming tailgate celebration. I know several of you are planning on attending. That's all I have, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll go to committee reports, administration, IT. Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report has been submitted in its entirety. So the city staff met with a vendor at the GMB office building regarding the carpet replacement. They attended the Business and Economic Development Forum at the Nanticoke Senior Center. They met with a resident regarding code issues. They met with residents of Governor's Grant regarding HOA issues. They attended the part-time interviews. They attended the truck bid opening. We attended the SCAT dinner. For the IT report, they are updating host and vCenter servers to patch vulnerabilities. They were working on backup servers and clearing old backups. They've changed camera recordation specs to save space and storage. They are working on to-do lists and price breakdowns for the High Street camera project. For the administration, for the financing, they are working on the fiscal year 2021 audit. We're not sure if it's going to be in person or virtual yet. They are processing utility disconnects. Everything else, it's routine business.
Thank you very much. Next, police fire, Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The police and fire reports are a matter of record. However, I'll give you highlights. Chief Wilson from the fire department reports there are 731 fire calls to date. There were a total of 83 calls for September and 38 calls so far for October. That leaves us with an average of 2.7 calls per day in September and 3.4 calls so far per day in October. So it's been a very busy October for the fire department, as well as it being Fire Prevention Month. I mean, there's dozens or hundreds of kids that are going through the facility, plus answering calls. It's been a very busy month for the fire department. Under EMS calls, 2,974 calls to date, an average of 11.1 calls per day in September and 11.6 calls per day in October. That leaves us with a total of 3,705 calls to date for 2021, or an average of 13 calls per day for the year. A couple significant calls. There was a structure fire where they assisted Station 71 on Seaford Road, and a motor vehicle crash with entrapment on Atlanta Road. Under apparatus, we have Tower 87 is out of service. Engine 87-2 has just been returned to service with, it had some pump issues. And Marine 87 was returned to service with some motor issues. It was out of service briefly. Under EMS, there's some training going, testing and interviews going on, as well as training. Pardon me. The department went through some NFPA testing for their annual pump test. Thank you. I've got a bunch of them here. Thanks. So there's an annual testing service of all the whole Maltro hydraulic rescue tools. Is that generic, or is that a brand term for Porter Power?
No, that's the, you probably think it's like Jaws of Life.
Okay, Jaws of Life, yeah.
The hydraulic rescue
Right.
tool is that.
Okay, so if you've ever seen the Jaws of Life work, they have to test those routinely. And then the annual SCBA apparatus testing, that will start on the 14th to meet the current certification. Now, you might recall I had mentioned that, that the department received new Draeger air packs, and as a part of this, as a part of that purchase, they agreed to do the updates and the testing as a gratis, free, as a result of purchasing the new equipment and making the updates and doing the testing. A lot of community events, too numerous to actually mention, but at the bottom you can see where on October 11th they had 165 children and 50 adults go through the facility, and on today they had another 50 children and 25 adults go through the facility for Fire Prevention Week. They were active also for Police Night Out. They had a display at Lowe's as part of their public outreach. So under Seaford Police Department, you can see the crime chart, the totals for 2021. You can see drug crimes are elevated for the 2021 year to date over 2020. The chief is investigating the reasons why. You can see the total number of crashes, DUIs, and false alarms there in the mix. The chief did note during our meeting an 86% clearance rate, with an average clearance rate for other crimes going up to 56%. That's a big clearance rate increase in clearance rate from the high 30s previously. So some of these crimes are being solved and getting cleared out of the system and closed out. You'll see under drug complaints, the total number of drug crimes, the adult arrests, juveniles, and prosecutions decline. 304 traffic contacts, resulting in 48 citations. You'll note in previous meetings, the citations had gone up, but they've dipped down a little bit, even though they're making quite a few contacts. We had 29 crashes during this period. Unfortunately, there was one fatal bicycle accident during this period. And you'll see in the crime view chart the distribution time of day for those incidents. Under significant events, you can see they've responded to a lot of shots fired complaints where they do an investigation and ask for witnesses and no witnesses come forward, so they're looking for ways to determine if it's actual shots or fireworks or what's going on, or trying to get people to step forward. They did clear some guns off the street. Illegal guns or guns possessed by persons prohibited. So some of those weapons have been removed from the street. Under admin, you can see that the administration was quite busy, and they had on the 7th, they had their Seaford night out, and we appreciate everybody coming out. It was a great event, and all the supporting agencies that showed up. It was a very good event. Under training, Joe Palm attended the Dover Police Control Tactics Instructor Training Program. That was a 32-hour program in September, and in October, there's 6 officers attended the Force Science Institute Realistic De-Escalation Training, and protest and demonstration virtual training was attended by Staff Sergeant Horn. There's also some upcoming first aid training and certified instructor training coming up as well. I'd like to take the time out to thank the department for putting on Seaford Night Out and all of that, and also the fire department for attending the recent SCAT meeting held at the fire hall, which they were treated to a presentation by Mr. Paul Eichler.
About sprinklers.
That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you for your men being at the returns of Lieutenant Johnson's remains. They really did a great event to bring honor to that service. So we honor those when they do that. So thank you very much. All right, Councilman Holland, Code Parks and Rec.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Soft Parks and Recs. They completed 71 work orders for this year. They worked on the major irrigation repair at the sports complex, still in process. And they held 4th and 5th week of youth sports. Flag football playoffs and championship will begin next week. And Tina is continuing to update scores and standings for youth flag and men's slow pitch on social media. And she has begun working on changes to the park rental agreements permits. And I will switch chairs to code. Signage is installed at Wawa's parking lot being paved with hopes of opening up soon. Site work has started at Amazon and work on interior is underway. All permits have been issued for the 7-Eleven, and demolition of old Dover pools, buildings is to start soon. And all other work is routine. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Councilman McCoy, Electric.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a few highlights in regards to the crew. They pulled the loop feed primary wire to Wawa and framed up the pole. They energized the old Seaford Inn on Sussex Highway for renovations. They worked at 200 Allen Street, relocating the primary wires to the transformer. as part of the Amazon project. Excuse me. In regards to our director, had his standard director's meeting and staff meeting. Got the final numbers for the Herring Run Professional Park project and got those numbers to June. Had a meeting about Mirford 1, Phase 3 and 4 layout, and had a progress meeting for the Western Sussex Business Center. Over the upcoming weeks, we're going to continue working at Wawa to run a loop feed to the front pole line, continue working at the Bel Air multifamily, and continue changing the lights on Sussex Highway to LED. And had a good time with the crew. Sat down for lunch for the Public Power Week. And thank you to Tricia Newcomer for organizing all that and getting the meals and all that good stuff. So that has been my report. It's been submitted in its entirety.
Yeah, that was a good event. All right, and finally, Councilman King, Public Works and Wastewater.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report has been submitted in its entirety. I'll start with the Public Works Department and hit some of the highlights that's taken place over the last 2 weeks. They've been working on replacing signs throughout our town. They had to go around and recount. They had about 100 missing meters from the AMI that they had to read. They partnered with the Night Out and put up and tore down barricades. They've been working on a lot throughout the city on big piles of limbs and trees. It just seems like there's a lot of activity going on throughout the community, a lot of tree work. I've reported out over the last multiple meetings that about a job opening. So Burley and City Manager Charles Anderson made an offer to an individual, which is a good thing, get the department back up and staffed fully. I'll jump over to the wastewater treatment facility and compost. All is going well, receiving all flow from Bridgeville and Greenwood. Plant performance remains good. No major equipment maintenance is needed. So some of the upcoming activities for Public Works over the next 2 weeks, they're going to work on Front Street and seal a lot of the cracks. They're going to patch Shipley and South Market for Del Dot. They're going to continue to replace fire hydrants on Market Street prior to the repaving. And then on the water treatment facility, just continue with performance maintenance as needed and screen for compost. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Good night.